first question is, why is America so politically divided?
Um, I feel like a lot of the division comes from like inequity in education and human nature. And I think people like fundamentally develop like group related identities where they like put members of their immediate group before people that they don't consider to be part of their immediate group. And there's like all kinds of studies that show in like apes and stuff like that, that there's like, you know, we are fundamentally social beings, and like our brains have shortcomings, and like we naturally form us and them mentalities, which are unethical and immoral, and like we don't see the totality of the people in the country as being us, even though we ought to. So the largest component is human nature, and then you can ask the question, why do we have this shortcoming mentally where we don't consider everyone part of the us group? And I think that just has to do with a lack of education. I think that there have been some really horrific things that have happened to, in particular, the minority groups in history. And that has caused systemic inequalities in our society, and there are people that don't have an appreciation or contextual understanding of why that's important, and I think they see themselves in a lot of ways as being disconnected from that and not having done that, and there's just a lot of not talking, and just general selfishness and greed and awful things about people that you know cause it.
And I guess next question is, what issues would you say are the greatest sources of division? I know you kind of answered that, at least started to, I think.
I mean, you asked me what do people disagree about the most?
I think you can read the question that way if you choose to.
I mean, people disagree about fundamental values. I think there's a lot of disagreement about like social policy, stuff like gay marriage and stuff like that, that comes from people being closed-minded and having like a traditional view of what's appropriate and what's not, that stems from a lot of different places. One of those places is religion, and the history of religion and the history of persecution that was, you know, put forth by the church at various points in history. So I think people definitely disagree on what isn't moral, and people feel like they need to go outside of themselves to enforce that morality on other people. So from like a social issue point of view, I mean, I think it's all about history and power structures that have, you know, been dominating in society and affected the types of education and thoughts people have gotten exposed to. And like, despite like science bringing us forward and all kinds of things, there's people that are rooted in the past. And then from a conservative level, it's just you either have money or you don't have money, and that's going to affect what you think about liberal spending.
Thank you. And then the final question is, what would you say your recommendations are for bridging this divide?
Well, the primary most important thing is education, and I think that you need to have a really well-educated population so they can understand the nuances of an issue and step outside of like their gut knee-jerk reaction. I think that like regardless of what side of any matter you might land on, obviously you need to like engage seriously in having a conversation and attempting to understand the other side. There's like too quick of a jump to persuade people into whatever direction of thinking you have, and not enough effort put into like listening and understanding, and that like creates a culture of like fighting and getting into a shouting match instead of generally trying to like connect and understand another person's point of view.